Look his face.
Yeah.
He's dangerous.
He's special.
You can like.
The guy is special. Everything that could possibly be special about this guy is special. A guy like this is the type of guy that you love to watch and follow. The most special guy that I've ever come across.
All right, hello and welcome back to the McCorry Sports Show. Today we have the man that you see every time you watch one of the UFC press conferences, John Morgan. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So before you started, what initially drew you to doing journalism?
You know, honestly, man, like a lot of kids, I guess, I grew up playing sports. I loved it, man. You know, soccer, baseball, basketball, enjoyed it all. But, you know, you get to a point where I guess you realize like the idea of being a professional athlete is probably not going to play out for you. But I love writing. You know, I love writing and I love telling the stories of the athletes and you know, helping to share things about it. And so, you know, I thought, well, hey, there's a way I could potentially be involved in sports and you know, is to be a sports journalist, you know, just a sports writer. I was like, that'll at least keep me around sports and maybe something I can do for a living. And then, you know, at that time, of course, you know, MMA wasn't near the powerhouse that it was today. So I really never envisioned myself being an MMA reporter. I just wanted to be in sports somehow. But then as MMA continued to grow, I started to realize it was something I had a passion for. I started following from the very early days, but it just wasn't a real, you know, industry. And as it started to grow a little bit, I was like, well, wait a minute. Not only can I be a sports journalist, I can help document this sport that I've been passionate about from the beginning anyway. And so that's kind of how it became the idea of, hey, let's chase after being a mixed martial arts journalist.
So was there a specific fight you saw on the TV, like one, from the early days that said, oh my gosh, this is like my favorite sport? And I want to,
you know, it's crazy.
This for life.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. You know, it's funny. So I actually kind of got exposed to the sport from the very beginning. I mean, the first UFC I ever attended live was UFC 16, if you can imagine that. So I mean, I was watching from the beginning. So it was the early UFC. It was the early Pancrase as well. If people have ever seen that, as an organization over in Japan that really started about the same time as the UFC, the exact same year in '93. And I watched those. I watched both of them, you know. And so it was never really one fight. It was just the sport itself, man. The whole thing where it was just like, man, you know, who are these? You know, it wasn't women at the time. It was just men. Of course, now it's men and women. But it's like, who are these guys that are stepping in the cage that are, you know, willing to do this, man? I mean, these guys are sacrificing everything, putting their health on the line to go do this, you know, competition. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. You know, Hoist Gracie, of course, in the early days, you know, just completely blowing our mind in terms of what we thought, you know, a fight would really look like, you know. And then you see, wait a minute, this Brazilian jiu-jitsu thing is pretty special. So yeah, it's just really the early days of sport that turned me on to it.
And so obviously you went to college, I'm guessing. What did you study in college to help you get to this point of your?
Yeah, no, listen, I you know, I studied journalism, and nowadays it's funny though, it's a lot different than it used to be, man. You know, if I was talking to somebody now, and you know, a lot of times I'll get, you know, kind of young journalists to ask me what we do, man. It's just make sure you learn everything, man. You know, nowadays in school, you know, you're really going to get exposed to how to do video editing, how to do audio editing, how to do, you know, just learn to do everything. You know, when I was going, it was really you could kind of specialize. You know, you were like, I want to be a writer. That doesn't exist anymore. Like, there are no writers. Like, you got to do everything nowadays. So yeah, you know, if I was talking to anybody that was studying today, I would just, man, use that time in college to get as much practice in all aspects of this business as you can, especially getting trained on the technical side of things, because the more you know how to do, the more valuable you are to any place you might potentially work.
And with the UFC, did you work with a promotion prior to that? And then the UFC said, hey, do you want to come over and work with us? Or how did that work out?
Well, no, I mean, so I work for MMA Junkie, and MMA Junkie is owned by USA Today Sports. So, I mean, I've you know, I've just started applying for credentials like anybody else, you know, in the early days. And you know, heck, we got turned down for credentials for a long time, and now we're, you know, at pretty much every show. But you know, it's funny, during the pandemic, especially, man, I've been at most of the UFC shows because I live in Las Vegas, and obviously the Apex it becomes such a big home. But you know, normally I'd be out covering Bellator and you know, covering other organizations as well. So, but unfortunately, with the pandemic, you know, unfortunately, I guess it's been my honor to be at all the UFC events, but I haven't been at any other organizations events, you know, since the pandemic began, just because of the way travel's worked out.
And the Apex, how is that? So what is the event like compared to that, in the energy of the fighters and the whole arena with just the press and even Dana, to a pay-per-view? Is there a lot more energy in the UFC company when there's a pay-per-view?
Yeah, man, it really is. That full arena does a lot. I mean, the Apex has been a blessing, right? I mean, if it wasn't for the Apex, what we have done in the early days of the pandemic, would we have been able to hold events? Would these guys have been able to compete? It's been a blessing. But man, there is nothing like the full on
Yeah.
crowd, the energy that it brings. It's unique being in the Apex because you can really you can hear the punches and the kicks land. You can hear the weight of the blows. You can hear the coaches giving instructions to their guys, and that stuff's kind of cool. But nothing makes up for just the feel of being in the packed arena. That's just another level.
Yeah, and I've been watching MMA for since like late 2018, early 2019, because I'm young, and so that's just I've always kind of followed Connor and the big guys, and I finally got into it, and every fight night even had a crowd, and then it went to absolutely no crowd, and weirdly, in some aspects, depending on the card, I prefer it. You know what I mean? Like, depending on the card,
Yeah.
if it's not as big of a fight night.
There are
It's
definitely
kinda
some
fun.
positives to it. Like I said, I mean, it's a unique aspect. There's really some different things. There are some pros to it. There's pros and cons for sure. I mean, like I said, at first, I think we just, we had to do it. So everybody's just like, okay, well, this isn't so bad. And now, it's not bad. It's not bad, but
Yeah,
it's not
it's
the
not bad.
real thing. You know what I mean? It's not what it's all about. It's not that energy is just a whole different thing. The fight, I don't think it necessarily, impacts the fights tremendously. I think you still get a lot of quality action, but there's just nothing like the feel of a sold out crowd and the roar and the buzz and the energy that brings, man. That's something special.
And obviously, with the pay-per-views, you're there every single time, so you interact with these fans. Do you have a moment that was your favorite with another fan that you've experienced?
It's funny, man. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of fans. It's always an honor for me when people want to come up and take a picture or whatever. I'm like, I'm just a journalist, you know what I mean? I'm just out here working a job, so it's kind of cool when that happens. But not necessarily a fan interaction, but a fan moment that I'll never ever forget was Big Nog, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, scoring a knockout over Brendan Schaub in Brazil, and being in Brazil. And the Brazilians, Big Nog is an absolute legend. I don't even know if people realize how loved and admired he is there. But everybody kind of knew, like, ooh, man, it's the older guy up against the young guy. This isn't looking good for our guy. And then he scored a knockout. You looked up, and people were crying in the crowd, man. It was amazing. To have that type of feel where they're literally in tears because they saw this guy win. Man, that was a moment that I'll never forget in terms of fan interaction.
And you've obviously worked on a lot of different cards. Do you have a card that really was like your favorite to work, whether it was like in this past year or of all time? Because this past year has been amazing.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, obviously there's so many great fights, but working Georges St. Pierre fights at the Bell Center in Montreal was always amazing because it's so loud in there. It's like a hockey arena that's, the seating is very vertical, so the fans are right on top of the action. So being there was amazing. The stadium shows that we've been to have all been unique, man. Visually there's such a craziness to them. I mean, you'll never forget the sound of the crowd made when Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey in front of 65,000 people, and just everybody's going crazy. I mean, the return to Brazil was an amazing one. The fans that hadn't had it in so long, that was awesome. Shows in Japan are crazy, where you got the crowd that doesn't really cheer. They're kind of quiet, but they're so knowledgeable. They'll like applaud a guard pass, you know what I mean? So it's like incredible, a high level understanding of the game. So yeah, those different venues and those different moments. I mean, Conor McGregor at Madison Square Garden. I mean, unbelievable. Those things all stand out to you, man. They're special moments.
And you've obviously traveled the world. You've been from the range of MSG to arenas in Japan. Do you have an arena that really was like your favorite to be in?
It's recent, but Madison Square Garden's fun just because the crowd is fun. Like, and I think honestly, New York is more fun for the press conferences. That's where the crowd is literally like, cackling and yelling at the guys on stage. They're out there trolling the fighters and stuff. It's they're heckling. It's a lot of fun. They make for a fun audience. That's a great one. Listen, HSBC Arena, which is the arena in Rio. There's nothing special about it. It's kind of a shell of a building, if I'm being honest with you. It doesn't really compare much to like American stadiums in terms of luxury, but the crowd, man, the passion and the understanding of the sport, and the chance of the "Uy, vai morrer," we haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah,
So
the "You will die."
man, Yeah, exactly. So, those are all great. I've been fortunate, man. And the UFC, obviously, they put on a tremendous event, man. It's such a good live event presentation. I mean, they've got it down to a science at this point, but the energy they bring to the building is pretty unique.
Yeah, I've never been to a UFC event, but it's like my dream one day I have to go to one at least. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
And you've worked hundreds of press conferences by now. Do you have a favorite fighter that you've asked questions, whether it's Connor, whether it's Colby Covington, even recently, that had some fun to it? You've talked to some of the biggest guys in the sport.
Yeah, Colby's always an interesting character, right? You never know what he's going to say next.
Yeah.
That's tough as far as the best ones at press con. I mean, listen, these men and women are all fantastic. I mean, I really do enjoy it. I mean, Chael Sonnen was obviously always a lot of fun. You never knew what he was going to say, and he kept things entertaining. Back when we used to do the ones that where everybody was up there at the same time. I mean, there was one where Derek Lewis kind of fell asleep at the press conference. I was there. Robbie Lawler fell asleep at a press conference one time. That was pretty great. Michael Bisping was always amazing, man. Michael Bisping had a way of selling fights and just getting people interested in fights that maybe you thought you didn't care about because he was just so good at the trash talk and firing people up. So yeah, listen, I enjoy talking to everybody, to be honest with you. Everybody that's in the sport, man, they bring something to it. But those entertaining characters do keep it a little more fun.
And so not something we see anymore today, but the post-fight press conferences with everyone, like especially on pay-per-views, we've seen it with Luke Rockhold and Mike Bisping after their fight after Bisping knocked him out. That was one of the funniest press conferences I've ever seen. So how enjoyable is that, after all the energy has died down and it's just the fighters now, it's like the mood has set in.
Yeah, it's great to get a chance to talk to them right after the fact and kind of seeing them processing their emotion, hearing what they're saying. Those big press conferences where they had everybody. I know, and everybody always cites that UFC 199 one is there. Oh, I wish this was still going on. The problem is, when they do that, you had guys that had fought like 2 hours earlier that are being asked to stick around and wait, you know what I mean? And then they get up there and people are talking to the headliners. They're not talking to the other person that won on the first, main card fight of the night or whatever. So for the athletes, they prefer the way it's done now. I know it limits some of the interaction that we get. So I know fans kind of miss that a little bit, but it really is better for the athletes. And it's a hell of a lot easier for us in video production as well, because you don't have to keep moving the camera back and forth and readjusting focus and readjusting framing. You just kind of have it on that one chair. So, but yeah, listen, depending on what role I'm doing, either I'm doing play-by-play and I'm arena and I'm cage side, which is amazing because you get the best seat in the house, or I'm in the back interviewing the fighters and doing video for that. And both of them are unique. When you're doing play-by-play and you're in the you're in the arena, it's amazing, because again, you're cage side and you're getting to see these amazing fights. But there's something pretty cool about talking to these athletes, after their big wins and being the first person to talk to them as they get a chance to kind of process everything that happened. It's pretty cool to see that up close.
Yeah, and you've worked with the UFC for a very long time. You see on your Instagram, you've been there UFC 171 and obviously way earlier. And what do you think is the best thing about working with the UFC? The fights, or just even behind the scenes, the people like Dana, like just everyone behind the scenes?
I mean, listen, the fights are definitely a highlight, right? I mean, we all love it. I don't know many people that cover the sport that don't have at least some fandom for it and some love for it. You know what I mean? So the fights are fun, but it's getting to know all the people, and being around them. I mean, I will say that, the UFC, of course, now owned by a big corporation, it's a bit more corporate in its structure than it used to be. It used to be a little bit more of a family run business. And that's just what happens as businesses grow. But yeah, it's fun to work with the people there at the organization. And it's kind of just fun to be around the whole experience. It's especially when we're traveling, not that I love being at home, man. It's been great spending a lot of time in Las Vegas and, without as much travel and being able to spend more time with my son. That's amazing. But there is something pretty cool about being kind of on the road with the traveling circus, I guess, that's going around from town to town and getting to see the energy that's around it.
And obviously you have a friendship with Bruce Buffer. We see it on your Instagram. What's he like in person?
Buff's a great guy, man. He's a very smart, savvy businessman. So he's a great person to get business advice from and to talk about, branding and growth and that sort of thing. So he's phenomenal at that. But he's just a good dude, man. He's a very sincere, top level guy who's really lucky to call a friend, man. He's a great dude. He's a big personality, man. That you don't get in the octagon and do what he does without being a big personality. But he's sincerely. A very humble guy and a very kind guy that treats people well. So lucky to call him a friend. He's a good dude.
And that's all I've planned. That was it for the Pet McCorry Sports Show presented by Headrush. You can buy that or the hoodie in my background and many more. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. That was it. That was John Morgan. You know who he is. You see him every time you load up a press conference, as I said in the introduction. Now, obviously, my sponsor, I mentioned it in the outro, Headrush. It's an awesome brand. They're very friendly. They were kind enough to send me some gear. That's the new sponsor of the show. I announced it last week. I'll be wearing it in every single interview. If you go to their website, headrushbrand.com, then you'll be able to get shirts like this, hoodies like the one in my background, and many, many more. They have awesome designs. They have sponsored some of your favorite guys like Dustin Poirier, Chuck Liddell, Showtime Pettis, Carlos Condit, and many more. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out.